Hello and welcome to another episode of Damn Interesting Week. We are so glad you've decided to join us. My name is Jennifer Lee Noonan.
I'm Angela Epley.
I'm Spurr-Chen.
I'm Bradley Calhoun.
And this was a damn interesting week. So let's get started with our first link.
First link. Okay, from The Guardian. Have y'all heard about this new video game called Relooted?
I have, but I don't know much about it.
Oh, man. If you wanted the counterpart to Lara Croft, well... So it's a new South African video game, and players basically take back African artifacts that are held in Western museums. And you do so in a series of museum heists, which are so hot right now, right?
I love this concept.
Isn't that wonderful? It's part of a growing campaign to repatriate treasures looted by colonial armies, like in the real world. But when you play this game, you become a South African sports scientist and parkour expert, Nomali, and she leaps and dives through museums to retrieve 70 real objects. So they haven't made up any of these artifacts. These are actual artifacts, like an Asante gold mask that was taken by the British Army when it destroyed the Asante Empire's capital, Kumasi. Another object, the skull of the Tanzanian king Mangimeli, which was taken to Germany after its colonial regime executed him in 1900.
Whoa.
Yeah. In fact, a 2018 report commissioned by the French president estimated that over 90% of Africa's material cultural heritage was held outside the continent. Yikes! So, Berlin's Ethnologische Museum and Cambridge University are among some of the institutions that have actually returned Benin bronzes to Nigeria, for example. The chief executive of Nyamakop, which developed Relooted, said real-life repatriation is enormously complicated, and it's been ongoing for decades, in some cases even a century or more. So with this game, they're giving people this hopeful, utopian feeling of what it's going to feel like when all these artifacts finally come home.
Mm-hmm.
He started creating the game in 2018 after his mom returned from the British Museum outraged at seeing the Nereid Monument, which is a Lycian tomb from Turkey. The museum says it was brought to the UK, quote, with the full permission of the Ottoman Turkish authorities. But Mom was shocked by the audacity of stealing a whole building. And she just very flippantly mentioned, well, you should make a game about taking this back to where it belongs. And challenge accepted.
Some of the best ideas come from moms, man. I think that's great.
Well, the game was created by a team from more than 10 African countries, but they also got a lot of voice actors who were hired from the countries of the characters that make up Nomali's heist crew. And part of that was a decision from the game's narrative director, Mohali Mashigo, who said, if we were going to go as far as researching real artifacts, getting a pronunciation guide for the artifacts, then creating these characters from Cameroon, DRC, Malawi, and more, I wanted to make sure it sounded like different voices from different places.
Yeah.
So the vision of the continent is more African futurist rather than the more fantastical genre of Afrofuturism. The idea is that it's at the end of the 21st century with cities and countries that work for people. So not quite solar punk, maybe a little transition phase, maybe.
Yeah, that's useful to know there's different terms. I would not have recognized that those mean different things.
Same. I'm more familiar with Afrofuturism from some of the speculative fiction that I read, but maybe they needed to open this up to an audience that may be less future and more near future. So like we could actually connect the dots between repatriation outside of a video game.
Right.
Maybe.
It makes it more real that, no, this is a thing we could achieve. Yeah.
Exactly. And the idea of having cities and countries that work for people, it's kind of like a best case scenario of what these former colonies could look like. Whereas in contrast, in the game, Europe and the United States are intentionally made generic, such as the old world or the shiny place, because they wanted to parody the way that the West represents Africa.
Oh, wait, so are we the shiny place or is England the shiny place?
Europe is the old world, but the United States is the shiny place.
Yeah, damn right we are.
No. Now, one important thing to note here is that the museums are not real, other than the Museum of Black Civilizations in Dakar, which is where you return looted objects to an symbolically empty hall before making the final journey to the home country. Probably wanted to make sure to sidestep any. No, we're not actually training people to raid actual museums. We're going to use very different maps, but real objects.
I mean, we're okay with training people how to kill things. Just
not blueprints.
Steal.
Not accurate.
The Call of Duty has nothing to do with repatriating objects, does it now? All right, next link.
Next link.
This article comes to us from Popular Mechanics, and it's titled, Scientists Got 20 People to Dream About Puzzles. They Woke Up with Answers.
Ooh.
So, a team of Northwestern University neuroscientists tried putting ideas into the minds of sleeping test subjects by playing sounds associated with puzzles the sleepers had earlier tackled during their waking hours. When they did this, an overwhelming number of subjects woke up remembering dreams in which they were trying to crack puzzles that they hadn't been able to solve before they dozed off. Even more impressively, they were more likely to solve the problems that had appeared in their dreams once they woke up. So, scientists now think there could be associations hidden in the back of your mind during waking hours that emerge in the rapid eye movement, or REM phase, of sleep. And, you might think this could be hard to believe, but the Beatles' iconic hit Yesterday, much of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and even the organization of their periodic table of elements were all reportedly influenced by dreams. Karen Concali and her team recruited one cohort of subjects who were already reportedly capable of lucid dreaming, and another that was not composed of lucid dreamers. Each subject spent 2 overnight lab sessions sleeping and dreaming while the researchers tried to influence their dreams. Before each sleep session in the lab, subjects took an alertness test that involved pressing a button when a certain letter flashed on the screen, which was meant to test how alert they remained even through something monotonous. Then they were given puzzles focused on cognitive restructuring, and each puzzle was accompanied by a different soundtrack that was played to subjects before they began to solve the puzzle, and which included silent pauses intended to keep the subject's brain from experiencing habituation, or growing too used to a repeated stimulation and thus becoming desensitized to it. The subjects were then given 3 minutes to solve each puzzle while listening to a verbal recording of the puzzle's title and its soundtrack. Subjects then listened to the soundtrack one more time, and then were asked to memorize the sound and puzzle duo before going on to the next puzzle. They were tested on how well they remembered these memorized pairs before falling asleep. And then, when the subjects were woken up at 4 a.m., rude, but yeah, science, they were hooked up to electrodes and told that they might hear sounds associated with the puzzles after falling asleep again. The experimenters also verbally suggested strategies the subjects could use, such as solving a problem out loud as they dreamed, or asking a character who appeared in a dream to work on it with them. 75% of subjects ended up dreaming about the puzzles they'd been working on earlier, and on average those dreams incorporated 26% of the puzzles that had gone unsolved while they were awake. She said, when puzzles were incorporated into dreams, they were more likely to be solved by the next morning.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that they associated a specific sound with each specific puzzle, so they could be like, this is the one that we're trying to trigger in you.
Yeah.
Because, a generalized, hey, maybe listening to some clicks while you're asleep just kind of makes you think about stuff. It's like, no, we're really going to make you think about this one puzzle, and we already proved that you associated this puzzle with this sound effect while you were awake.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, but it's also cool that you could, actually have a strategy to prime yourself towards a certain problem. I don't know, I'm imagining listening to a song on repeat while you're thinking about something, and then go to sleep listening to it.
That's kind of what mantras have meant to be, as sort of or if you're taking psychedelic therapy, having what they call anchor phrases to kind of connect you to the larger thought, almost like a, I guess, sleeper cell activation code. I don't know.
Right, well, because once you're untethered, it's really hard to remember what it was you were trying to focus on.
You're
so you need that little
baby.
outside nudge to be like, hey, we know you want to dream about a giant plate of spaghetti, but...
How about this math problem?
Yeah.
Right. Get back on track.
Fun, right?
Next link.
Next link.
All right. I have some potentially good news in light of all the crap that's been going out there. This comes from New Atlas. Remarkable reusable liquid stores solar energy like bottled sunlight. So one of our major challenges, right? When the sun goes down, we lose that solar energy, and we've been trying to store it in batteries. And batteries aren't great right now. They're bulky, complex, expensive, not to mention the big, giant lithium mines and everything like that. So the researchers had developed a new material that eliminates the need for batteries, and it stores this directly as heat. It's a new form of molecular solar thermal energy storage that they call MOST. I feel like they should have put an I in there so they could have been moist energy.
Yeah, but they didn't want to do that.
Yeah, this is an emerging class of solar tech that stores sunlight directly in chemical bonds on a molecular level and then releases it later as heat. When exposed to sunlight, each molecule undergoes a reversible structural change, shifting from a low energy configuration into a strained high energy form. Think of it like a tiny spring. But when a catalyst such as heat or acid is applied, the molecule snaps back to its original shape, releasing all that stored energy. Best part, the process is repeatable. Now, this isn't new. They've been working on something like this since 2017, just with two different kind of molecules that I am not even going to try to pronounce. However, the tech is still in its early pilot stages. So 2017, I'd say we're in the middle pilot stages now. So in the research, it released enough heat to boil 0.5 milliliters of water, which doesn't seem like
small.
a lot. Yeah. But boiling water is energy intensive. And the fact that they can do it under ambient conditions is still a big achievement. So in addition to being able to charge and discharge repeatedly without losing its structure, the molecule can also store energy for months. Apparently, its half-life is calculated to up to 481 days at room temperature.
Wow.
So like, here's an example of using it, right? A solar collector on the roof. During the day, sunlight converts the molecules into their energy-rich form. The charged liquid is stored in an insulated tank. When heat is needed, for example, for hot water, cooking, or space, the liquid is passed through a reactor where a trigger causes its release. And then the liquid returns to its original state and is ready to be recharged the next day.
That's interesting because I actually had a solar water heater that didn't use solar panels. It used a really thin layer of some kind of liquid. And all it really did was heat the liquid, and then the heat in the liquid came down and heated the water. Like, there wasn't any sort of chemical change. It was just we're taking the heat from up here and bringing it into the system. But it sounds like you already have the infrastructure for making the device that then does something slightly better with it and actually can store it rather than saying, well, this is the moment. Because it didn't work at night. That was part of the thing was it had to be a hybrid device.
And this can be stored for 487 days. So you could charge it during the summer and use it for heating during the winter. So, the only question I have that they don't have in here is, yes, it's scalable. How easy is it to make that Dwar configuration?
And there's always the question of, like, is it the giant solar farm where we then convert it to electricity and do what we normally do with it? Or is this like on a tiny scale in everybody's house? And do we have our little ampules of weird liquid that we're going to go lay out in the sun for a minute and then we're set for the evening?
We'll see.
That side feels a little more post-apocalyptic, but, we'll take what we can get.
That's right.
All right. Next link.
Next link.
All right, this next one is from Kurzgesagt After Dark, which is where the educational channel Kurzgesagt uploads their videos that are maybe slightly more adult in theme. In this case, due to some pretty rampant death and violence to both humans and animals. It's called Whale Hunting Was Absolutely Crazy.
Yep.
So, as best we can tell, whale hunting started around the 7th century, but that's just when humans started getting into boats to go hunt them. Prior to that, coastal civilizations had been using whale carcasses that washed up on the beach for thousands of years. So by the time they had good boat technology, they were already very aware of how valuable these creatures were. Because, aside from the obvious things like meat and bones for making tools, humans in the 7th century were well into the age of burning fuel for lamps. And whale oil, which is rendered down from blubber, happened to burn brighter and cleaner than any other fuel we had discovered at that point. It also, as society advanced, turned out to be a great lubricant for machinery, a nice source of soap, and a useful ingredient for waterproofing the ships that they then went out and hunted the whales in. So, in the late 7th century, the Basque civilization in the Bay of Biscay built giant stone watchtowers along the coastline that would look for the shadows of whales in the distant water, and as soon as they spotted one, this massive alarm would go out across the town, including like signal fires and drums, causing everyone to drop what they were doing and grab their harpoons. And there was a very specific type of whale that they were hunting in the beginning called the North Atlantic right whale. And the reason these guys were special is that while most whale carcasses will sink as soon as the animal dies, the fat content of a right whale causes them to float, which meant they could be towed back to shore. And the Basque people spent several centuries perfecting their techniques and selling their whale oil further and further abroad until finally, in the 17th century, the English and the Dutch decided to get in on the action. They very nicely hired Basque consultants and crews and began whaling in the waters both further north and further west, most especially in the American colonies. And so this is one of the first places where the New World starts to prove its value, because right whale migration patterns take them straight down the coast of Massachusetts in an area where agriculture was basically crap compared to the rest of Europe. Like, eventually they'd get down to the south where things can grow, but in those early years of colonization, a single captured whale would earn each crew member on the boat the equivalent of 6 months' worth of farming income.
Jeez.
Wow.
At the same time, demand for whale oil was skyrocketing because over in London, they had just started installing public streetlights. And by 1740, there were no fewer than 15,000 outdoor lamps burning about half a whale every single night.
Ugh.
Now, not surprisingly, the waters off the coast of Massachusetts got massively overfished, and the right whale population began to crash. But around this same time, a whaling ship was accidentally blown off course past the far side of Nantucket Island, where they discovered a new species which we now call the sperm whale. And sperm whales were great because, number one, they also float, but number two, they have a reservoir in their heads of a substance called spermaceti, which creates the highest quality oil on the planet, worth about 2 to 3 times what you could get from a right whale. So all of a sudden, sperm whales are the new thing, and with that amount of money at stake, people are willing to risk a whole lot of danger. And sperm whales are quite a bit more dangerous because unlike the right whale, which is pretty slow and sticks to the coastline, sperm whales live way out in the Atlantic and have a lot more stamina. So the minute they stuck that first harpoon in, the sperm whale would effectively bolt and start dragging their ship along the surface in what became known as a Nantucket sleigh ride.
Ugh.
Yeah. This would go on for at least 4 to 8 hours, during which time they had no control over where they were going, and crew members were occasionally getting bounced off the deck and left to drown.
Good.
Oops.
Yeah, so, there you go.
Sorry.
But eventually, the whale would get tired, and they could go in for the kill. But because this whole process was taking place so far from shore, the expeditions hunting sperm whales developed a system where they could process the carcass right there in the water, rather than towing it all the way back. To do this, crew members would climb out onto the floating carcass with axes and carve out 2-meter-wide, quote, blanket pieces of blubber, which each weighed about a ton and would get hauled up onto the ship through a pulley system. These pieces would then get rendered in brick furnaces that were built right into the deck of the ship. And it's worth noting that the only reason whale oil is so pure and smokeless in its final form is because all the impurities are getting burned out during this stage. And so accounts from the time describe crew members being completely unable to see through the smoke on deck and being able to smell a rendering ship for 30 kilometers in every direction.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a good thing to remember anytime we want to start mythologizing the past. Like, the past smelled horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it would take about 3 to 4 days to process a single whale. But within a few hours, sharks would be drawn by all the blood in the water. So anyone who fell overboard at this stage was a goner. It was also quite common for men to get crushed by swinging chunks of blubber on the pulley system or to get scalded by boiling oil. And generally speaking, about a third of the crew members who initially signed up for an expedition would end up either dying or just deserting the ship before the trip was done.
Yeesh.
But those who did make it to the end were handsomely rewarded. By the 1850s, whaling had become the 5th biggest industry in the U.S., and we controlled about 75% of the world whaling market. Then, in 1859, everything changed, because that's when America figured out how to pump petroleum out of the ground. And while kerosene isn't as good as whale oil, it was so much cheaper that it didn't matter. So, good news, within a couple of decades, the whaling industry had completely bottomed out. Ironically, however, whale oil was still the only good lubricant for machinery at this point. So as petroleum ushered in the industrial age, the need for whale oil actually started to make a comeback thanks to all this new machinery. America, however, had moved on, and this time it was Norway that jumped on the opportunity. But with the aforementioned industrialization, things were very different. The Norwegians had motorized boats using steam-powered catapults with explosive-tipped harpoons, and they also had air compressors that could pump a whale carcass of any species full of gas to force it to float.
Ugh.
And then after the technological advances of World War II, Russia and Japan also entered what became known as the Whaling Olympics, building giant factory ships that could process dozens of whales in a single day.
Blech.
But of course, the ocean couldn't sustain this mechanized assault, and the populations of nearly every whale species crashed, some almost to extinction. So by 1982, the International Whaling Commission had voted to impose a moratorium on all commercial whaling, although pretty critically, Japan, Norway, and Iceland all refused to sign it and still haven't to this day.
Well, we also have Captain Kirk and Spock to thank in the 1980s.
Right. Well, and they talk pretty extensively in the article about like the value of the Save the Whales campaign and how it really did work and it really changed the entire industry. And they are at least a little more conscientious, I think, than they used to be about how many whales they kill per year. But yeah, at the end of the day, like the deadliest catch is the nice, polite version of what we used to do.
I had no idea about the rendering on the ships. I mean, 12 whales a day on a ship is crazy.
Revolting. And just the amount of like death pollution in the waters that produced.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that occasionally a person would fall out and get eaten by sharks. Like, you know, there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Next link?
Next link.
All right, we go to the conversation for this look at Michaelangelo, who apparently hated painting the Sistine Chapel. He didn't even want to be a painter to begin with, despite what we now think of him. We look at this through an example of an interesting artifact, kind of a callback to earlier. It went for $27.2 million, and we are talking about a 5x4-inch red chalk drawing of a woman's foot.
So a foot fetishist is
We congratulate Quentin Tarantino on his new find. No, it was only expected to get about $1.5 to $2 million, so it really exceeded expectations. But in part, it's because experts believe this drawing to be a study for the figure of the Libyan Sibyl, which is a female prophet who appears on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Now, Michelangelo painted the iconic frescoes from 1508 to 1512, but he first sketched out the overall composition and details in a series of preparatory drawings, and only about 50 of those drawings survive today. This was an artifact that was held in private collections for centuries, and it only came to light after the owner sent an unsolicited photo to Christie's auction house. We can only imagine how hot under the collar Christie's got when they took a peep at this little snapshot. But it was there that a drawings expert recognized it as one of the relatively few remaining studies for the Sistine frescoes. You can see the picture on theconversation.com, but it's really exciting because of the attention it has brought to Michelangelo's lifelong devotion to drawing, which was a medium he prized over painting. Now, in 1506, Pope Julius II put Michelangelo's sculpting work on a papal tomb at St. Peter's Basilica on hold. And they did that because they wanted to redirect the funds intended for the tomb to be for the renovation of the basilica itself. And how did Michelangelo respond? He closed his dang studio. He ordered his workshop assistants to sell everything. He abandoned 90 wagon loads worth of marble, and he just left Rome in disgust. 2 years later, Julius and his intermediary, Francesco Alidossi, were able to lure Michelangelo back to Rome with the promise of a 500 ducat payment.
Money, money, money.
Yeah, that's right. And a contract to paint the Sistine. Despite accepting, the artist went on to complain relentlessly about his new commission. He wrote to his father that painting is, quote, not my profession, because it was sculpture that was central to Michelangelo's identity. And Michelangelo would later joke that he became a sculptor even as far back as infancy, thanks to the breast milk of his wet nurse, who was the daughter of stonemasons.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, you know, there's a connection there. But beyond his enthusiastic embrace of sculpture and resentment over the Sistine, what he called the tragedy of the tomb, Michelangelo found painting and fresco back-breaking work. There's an illustrated poem he wrote to his friend Giovanni da Pistoia that says, quote, I've grown a goiter from this torture. My stomach is squashed. My beard is pointing at heaven. My brain is crushed in a casket. My breast twists like a harpy's. My brush above me all the time dribbles paint so my face makes a fine floor for droppings. He concludes, my painting is dead. I am not in the right place. I am not a painter.
Wow.
Now, the caricature that goes with that poem, where you can see, it's like in Mad Magazine, you have those little margin doodles. But it shows that not only did he have this cantankerous and restless mind in the words he wrote, but he used drawing to also reflect his inner workings. And it looks kind of like, I don't know, a side shot of somebody painting, but like all kind of twisted and stuff. In fact, Michelangelo's biographer Vasari used the term disegno, or design, to mean both a physical drawing and a work's overall design or concept. Later in 1563, Michelangelo would go on to be named master of the Accademia del Disegno in Florence, which aimed to teach drawing and design as the underlying skills necessary for sculpture, architecture, and painting.
Yeah, he died in 1564, so you got 1 year of that.
Oh,
Yeah, well.
you know, he made it. He made it.
Also, fun fact about the Sistine Chapel, the Last Judgment, right after he died, they hired a painter to come in and paint fig leaves over everything.
Well, and listen, he's going to have planned drawings of all of the genitalia somewhere. He's got them. We just don't know where they are yet.
Still in private collection, expected to
Right.
remain in private collection. Next link?
Next link.
This article comes to us from BBC. It's shorter, but also pretty important, I think. Title is First Writing Maybe 40,000 Years Earlier Than Thought.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not a small mistake. That's a big one.
it moves it out quite a bit. So the history of writing down thoughts and feelings could be tens of thousands of years older than previously believed, surprising the archaeologists who made the discovery. The researchers discerned patterns of meaning in lines, notches, dots, and crosses on objects in caves in Germany. The objects are from just before Homo sapiens moved to Europe from Africa, where they interacted with Neanderthals. Until now, it was thought that writing developed in Mesopotamia around 3000 BC, followed by hieroglyphics in Egypt and later in China and Mesoamerica. The work suggests that Stone Age people were as clever as modern-day humans, according to researcher Eva Dutkiewicz from Berlin's Museum of Prehistory and Early History. So far, we've only scratched the surface of what can be found in terms of symbol sequences on a wide variety of artifacts.
Scratch the surface. Oh.
Yeah.
The team analyzed more than 3,000 characters on 260 objects to uncover what they call the DNA of writing. Some of the objects are from a 37-kilometer-long cave system called the Lohntal in Baden-Württemberg, southern Germany. And there are some photos of these objects in this article, which are really interesting and worth looking up. There's a 40,000-year-old mammoth figurine that is engraved with rows of crosses and dots. There is an adorant, which is a piece of tusk, I believe, that has a human figure carved into the back. And then on the other side is the rows of notches and dots. Professor Christian Bentz from Saarland University and author of the new research says, our results also show that the hunter-gatherers of the Paleolithic era developed a symbol system with a statistically comparable information density to the earliest proto-cuneiform tablets from ancient Mesopotamia. So, in the same way you're trying to crack a code and see if it's gibberish or English, there's a statistical distribution of letters, spaces, gaps, and so on, and that's how you can know it is written language, even if we don't know what that language is.
Right.
And they also found denser patterns on the figurines than on tools. This is completely my own headcanon, but, I'm imagining maybe they were deities they are depicting, or histories of important figures, or maybe even personal figures in their lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, the simple idea that you can carve an entirely recognizable mammoth, but it's never occurred to you to put a symbol on something. It just feels like, yeah, of course they were writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the article ends, but I thought that was just a kind of a beautiful note to end on, thinking about these like Paleolithic era humans just like carrying around a carving with this special meaning. I thought it was just beautiful.
Well, a drawing as a design underpinning all kinds of art. We've just given credence to that for Michelangelo, so why not?
So the question is, which little dots and crosses means foot? And which one means I hate this and it's all in my beard and I don't like carving this mammoth and somebody paid me too much to do it. All right. Well, that is all we have time for today. We're so glad you've joined us. Some of the articles we did not have time to get to today include the most elusive color in chemistry might surprise you, wanderlust may be written in our DNA, and how a one-eyed creature gave rise to our modern eyes. So all that and more, plus everything we talked about today, can be found on damninteresting.com. If you like our podcast and want to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/damninterestingweek. In the meantime, my name is Jennifer Lee Noonan.
I'm Angela Epley.
I'm Spurr-Chen.
I'm Bradley Calhoun.
And we hope you have a damn interesting week. Bye-bye.